I've been thinking about how to say this for a long time. Not because I didn't know. I've known for a while. I just didn't know how to give it to you in a way that would actually reach you, in a way that wouldn't sound like an excuse, or worse, like something you'd already heard before and quietly set aside. There was a moment when I knew I was going to marry you. I remember exactly where I was, what the light looked like, the specific ordinary way you were just existing, not doing anything remarkable, and I thought, this is it. You are it. And then something happened. I've let you believe one version of what that was. I've let the silence fill in the story. But the story you've been telling yourself, I need you to know, is not the true one. What actually stopped me? I've never said out loud. Not to you, not to anyone. I'm going to say it now, but not yet, because you need to understand what I was carrying before that moment arrived, or the answer will land wrong. And I need it to land right. Stay with me. I want to start with something specific. Because when I say I was ready to marry you, I don't mean I had thought about it logically and decided it made sense. I don't mean I had weighed the options, considered the timing, and arrived at a conclusion. That's not what readiness felt like. That's not what you felt like. Readiness, when it finally came, felt like something settling, like a part of me that had been restless for years suddenly stopped moving. You know that feeling? The kind that doesn't announce itself, doesn't arrive with ceremony, just quietly shows up inside something ordinary? It was like that. It was quiet. It was certain. And the certainty came from you. I need you to understand what it meant for me to feel certain about something. I had built things that most people would call proof of certainty. Structures, systems, visions, stretched across decades. From the outside, I looked like a man who was always sure. But there is a version of confidence that has nothing to do with clarity. You can be relentlessly forward moving and still not know the one thing that matters most. You can build for the future and still not know who you are building it toward.
I didn't know that about myself until you.
You didn't arrive dramatically. You never did anything dramatically. And I think that's what disarmed me. You were just present, not performing presence, not carefully constructing an impression, just there, in a room, being entirely yourself without apology or announcement. I remember sitting across from you once. It was a completely unremarkable moment, and watching you reach for something. And I thought, I want to keep watching this. Not the grand version of you, this version, the one that doesn't know it's being seen. That thought, that quiet thought, was the beginning. And it terrified me. Not in the way fear usually arrives, loud, urgent, with its hands around your throat. It terrified me the way a door opening terrifies you when you've been standing on the other side of it for too long. The thing you wanted is now available, and wanting has always been easier than having. I had spent so long being good at distance. Let me be honest with you about that. Distance was not something that happened to me, it was something I had practiced, refined, made into a kind of discipline. You can tell yourself it's focus. You can call it drive. You can build an entire identity around forward motion. And the beautiful thing about forward motion is that it makes it impossible for anyone to question whether you are running from something rather than toward it. But you saw through that. You never said it directly. You didn't need to. I felt it in the way you waited, the way you gave me room without withdrawing, the way you never once demanded that I be easier than I was, but also never let me believe that my difficulty was neutral, that it cost nothing, that it came for free. You asked for something simply by being who you are. And the thing you asked for wasn't effort or achievement or proof of capability. You asked for me to arrive fully, not the version of me that was useful, the version that was real. Have you ever had someone ask for that from you? Not with words, with the whole quiet weight of their attention? I started imagining a life with you the way I imagine most things, in full, not the easy parts, the whole architecture, the mornings, the arguments neither of us would want to have, the parts of a life together that can't be delegated or optimized or built around, the parts that are just two people in the same room with nothing performing and nowhere to hide. I imagined all of it, and I didn't flinch. That was new. I started choosing things with you in mind, not announcing it, just orienting differently. The way you'd re-aim a compass without making a declaration about it. I found myself thinking, she would find this strange, or she would love this, or I want to be there faster so I can tell her this. You became a direction. That's the only way I know how to say it. You became the direction everything else was pointing. And that is when I knew. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because I need you to believe it before I tell you what happened next. I need you to know that the decision to marry you was not impulsive. It was not a performance of certainty I was hoping would become real. When I said to myself, privately, in the way that matters, I'm going to marry her, it was the truest thing I had said in a long time. Not the most complicated, the truest. There is a difference between the two, and I spent most of my life confusing them. Complicated felt like depth, simple felt like risk. But the truest things are always simple. They don't need qualifying, they don't need architecture around them. They land whole and they stay. You landed whole. You stayed. And I need you to hold on to that. Because what I'm about to move toward is going to try to make you forget it. There's going to be a moment in this where you might reach for the familiar story, the one where the reason was you, the one where something you did, or were, or weren't, created the distance. I need you to resist that story. Because the moment something shifted, the this that happened, it didn't happen because of what you were. It happened because of what you showed me. And what you showed me, I was not yet built to carry. That's chapter 2. But stay here a moment longer. Stay in the version of this where I was ready, where certainty was real, where you were the direction. Because that part is true. And it's the part I need you to believe first. I want to talk about something you've never let anyone talk about: the way you protect yourself. I'm not saying it as a criticism. I need you to hear that before I go further. I'm saying it because I saw it clearly from the beginning and I chose you anyway. I chose you because of it, in some ways. The protection was evidence, evidence that you had loved before and taken it seriously, evidence that what you guard is worth guarding. But here's what I want you to sit with. You've been so practiced at protecting yourself that somewhere along the way, you started doing it with me. And I don't think you even noticed when it began. It doesn't look the way people expect it to look. It doesn't look like coldness or cruelty. You were never cold with me. You were warm and present and genuinely there. And still, there was a layer. There was always a layer. I could feel the place where you stopped, the exact invisible line where you gave everything you had decided was safe to give, and held everything else just slightly beyond reach. I know the moment I'm describing. You know it too. It's the moment you caught yourself about to say the truest version of something, and you softened it instead. You translated it into something easier to carry back if it wasn't received well. You said the approximation of the feeling, not the feeling itself, because the feeling itself would have required you to stand completely undefended. And standing undefended had not always gone well for you. I watched you do this. I never called it out. I waited. I want to tell you why I waited. Because it wasn't passivity, it was recognition. I understood what you were doing, because I had spent my entire life doing a version of it. Mine looked different from yours. Mine looked like motion, like relentless forward movement, like building things so impressive that no one would think to ask what was underneath them. Yours looked like warmth that stopped just short of total surrender. But the mechanism was identical. We were both managing the distance between what we felt and what we showed. And that recognition, that was part of what made me so certain about you. When you see yourself in someone else, really see yourself, not the flattering version, not the version you've curated for public consumption, but the specific private way you have learned to survive, something happens. You either pull away from it because it makes you too visible, or you move toward it because for the first time, you feel like you might not have to explain yourself. I move toward you. Has anyone ever told you that about yourself? That your self-protection is not invisible? That the people who love you can feel exactly where the wall begins, not because it's ugly, but because everything right up to it is so honest, so completely real, that the place where you stop is unmistakable. I felt it every time. And here's what I need you to hear, because this is the part that changes what I'm about to tell you. Your protection made sense. Every layer of it made sense. You did not invent that caution out of nowhere. You built it from specific things that happened to you, things that taught you that being fully known was not always safe, that love was not always held carefully, that choosing someone completely was sometimes a decision you ended up making alone. You learned, and the learning was rational. But here's what I've been wanting to say to you for a long time. Something that was rational in the context where you learned it became a liability in the context of us. The wall that kept you safe before us was the same wall that kept us from becoming what we could have been. And I don't say that to put the weight of what happened on you. I say it because you deserve to understand the full picture, not just the part you could see from where you were standing. Because from where you were standing, you were doing everything right. You were showing up, you were present, you were giving me more than you had given most people, and you knew it, and it scared you, and you gave it anyway. I saw that. I want you to know that I saw it. The way you pushed past your own hesitation, quietly, without making it a declaration, just deciding, day after day, to stay open 1 degree more than felt comfortable. That takes more courage than most people will ever know. But there were still nights, and you remember these, even if you haven't named them, where I'd reach for something and feel that slight, almost imperceptible withdrawal, the room temperature version of yourself that arrived when the moment required the real temperature. And I'd sit with it and not say anything, not because I didn't care, because I understood it so completely that challenging it felt like asking you to undo something I had no right to undo. I needed to earn that. I knew I needed to earn it. And I was trying to. I want you to know that I was trying to, in the specific language of someone who has only recently learned that being still is a form of trying, that staying is a form of effort, that not leaving, for someone like me, who has always defaulted to motion, was its own kind of devotion. Stay with me. Because what happened, the thing I haven't told you yet, it didn't happen because your wall was too high. It happened in the moment your wall came down. And when it came down, I saw something I was not prepared to see. I saw how much you loved me. And you need to understand what that did to me before I can explain what I did with it. That's the part that nobody talks about. Not the fear of loving someone, the fear of being loved. The fear that arrives not when you're reaching for someone, but when someone reaches for you so completely that you suddenly understand, in your body, not your mind, what you stand to lose. That fear arrived in a single moment. It arrived with your face. And I wasn't ready for it. Not because of you, because of me. Because of something in me that had never been asked to simply receive before. Something that had built an entire world on giving, on doing, on moving forward, and had no muscle memory for what it meant to stay still inside someone else's love. I didn't have the language for it then. I'm giving it to you now.
Ein train to the Rico's not give us stain to Matthew and Rico's Matthew.
Because you deserve the language. You've been living inside an unanswered question long enough. Yeah. I want to talk about cost. Not in the abstract, in the specific, felt, daily way that maintaining distance costs something, the kind of accounting that never appears anywhere you can point to, but quietly drains everything you're trying to hold. Because here is what I understood too late. Distance is not neutral. I had always treated it as neutral. I had lived as though keeping a certain amount of space between myself and the people closest to me was simply a preference, a personality trait, a management style for intimacy, something sustainable, something I could choose without consequence. And you paid for that misunderstanding. So did I. We just paid in different currencies. Yours was quieter than mine. Yours looked like waking up some mornings and reaching for something that felt just slightly out of reach. Not absent, but not fully there either. It looked like the specific loneliness of being with someone who was present in every practical way, who was there, who showed up, who never gave you a clean reason to leave, and still feeling, in some deep unreachable place, that you were loving someone who was not yet fully on the other side of the door. I never fully walked through. You know that. You felt that, even when you couldn't name it. And you kept loving me anyway. I need you to understand how much that cost you. Because you made it look graceful, and graceful things hide their price. You never turned your need into a demand. You never weaponized your longing. You absorbed the gap between what we were and what we could have been, and you carried it privately. The way you carry most things, quietly, thoroughly, without letting it show at the surface. I noticed. I want you to know that I noticed. But here's the thing about watching someone absorb a cost you're creating. It does something specific to you. At first, it moves you. It makes you want to become worthy of that kind of patience. And I did want that. But over time, and I am not proud of this, but I am going to say it honestly because you deserve honesty more than you deserve a flattering version of me. Over time, that grace became something I leaned on. The fact that you didn't push meant I didn't have to move. The fact that you held it together meant I didn't have to reckon with what was coming apart. That is not love. That is convenience wearing love's clothing. And I used it, and I am sorry. But I also need you to see the other side of the ledger, because the cost wasn't only yours. The cost of distance, when you're the one choosing it, is that you start to lose fluency, emotional fluency, the ability to know what you're actually feeling in real time, as it's happening, rather than 3 days later when it's safe to examine. I had been operating at such a remove from my own interior for so long that by the time something genuinely moved me, I often couldn't identify it fast enough to respond to it. The feeling would arrive and I would observe it rather than inhabit it. I would catalog it instead of surrendering to it. And what I felt for you required surrender. I had no practice in that. None. I could give you time, attention, effort, presence in the physical sense, all of it. What I couldn't give you, fluently, in the moment it was needed, was the unguarded version. The version that didn't edit before it spoke. The version that could receive what you were offering without immediately calculating the exposure involved. That is the distance I'm talking about, not the distance between us in the room. The distance between what I felt and what I let arrive on my face. Have you ever loved someone who looked at you completely and still seemed far away? You've felt this. I know you have. And the cruelest part of that particular distance is that it's invisible to everyone else. You can't describe it without sounding unreasonable. He was there. He was attentive. He chose you every day. And still, there was a glass. Thin, clear, almost imperceptible, but a glass. You felt it. I was the one holding it. And I kept telling myself it was protection, when what it actually was a rehearsal for leaving that I had no conscious intention of using. That is what distance costs. It builds the architecture of an exit, even while you're trying to stay. It keeps one part of you permanently unentangled, insured against the full weight of loss. And the problem is that the very thing that insures you against loss also insures you against the full weight of love. You cannot selectively protect yourself from one while remaining open to the other. I know that now. I knew it, somewhere underneath, even then. And then came the moment, the specific, ordinary, completely unscheduled moment that I am going to tell you about before this is over. The moment I keep returning to. The moment that wasn't dramatic, wasn't loud, wasn't cinematic, and broke everything open anyway. If this is reaching you right now, if something in you just recognized something you've been carrying without a name, stay with me. What I'm about to move toward, I need you to hear, because the next part is where the real answer lives, and it is not the answer you have been preparing yourself for. It's worse than you think, and it's kinder than you think. Both of those things at the same time. Here's what I know about the price of distance now. After everything, it is never paid all at once. It accumulates in the smallest moments. In the question you didn't answer honestly, in the feeling you translated into something manageable before it reached your mouth. In the night you chose silence, not because you had nothing to say, but because saying it would have required you to stand somewhere unfamiliar. Those are the payments. They're invisible individually. Together, they compound into something you only understand when you look back and see the total. And the total was this. I had built, quietly and without intention, a version of us that was extraordinary in every visible way, and had one room I never let you into, one room I didn't fully enter myself. That room was where I kept the version of me that needed you. I couldn't let you in there. I couldn't even go in there alone. Because needing something you could lose is the most terrifying architecture a human being can live inside. I had built entire worlds rather than sit inside that room. I had launched things into orbit rather than simply sit with the fact that there was one person on this earth whose absence would undo me. You were that person. And I never told you. I kept the door closed. I kept the price invisible. I kept the distance elegant enough that we could both pretend it was just the way I was built. But it wasn't the way I was built. It was the way I had learned to survive. And surviving and living are not the same thing, and you deserved someone who had learned the difference. I have been circling the truth. I know that. I can feel it the same way you probably can. The way this has been building towards something specific, something I keep approaching and then pulling back from, like a man standing at the edge of a high place, looking down not in fear, but in recognition, knowing the fall is necessary, knowing it is the only way to the ground. I want to stand at that edge with you for a moment before we go over it together, because there is something I need to give you before I give you the answer. And that something is a choice. The same choice that was always yours, even when I was the one who seemed to be holding it. Here is what nobody tells you about loving someone who has not yet learned how to be loved. The choice is never theirs alone. The choice is always, eventually, yours. What you do with what you now know, how you hold it, whether you use it to rewrite the story you've been living inside, or whether you set it down and decide, quietly, finally, that the story is over and you are no longer obligated to keep asking it questions. Both of those are valid. I need you to know that both of those are valid, but I don't think you've let yourself believe that yet. I think you've been waiting for the explanation first, then planning to decide how you feel about it, as though your feeling needs to be informed before it can be real, as though what you've been carrying, the grief, the confusion, the specific low-grade ache of a love that ended without a clear reason, somehow doesn't count until it's been assigned a cause.
It counts. Without the cause, without the explanation, without any of what I'm about to give you, it counted.
I want you to hear that before anything else. What you felt was real, what you gave was real. The version of you that stayed open, that kept reaching, that kept choosing me, even when the return was incomplete, that version of you was not wrong. She was not naive. She was not foolish for loving someone before they were finished becoming who they needed to become. She was extraordinary, and she was carrying something that was never hers to carry. That changes now, today, in this moment. Look at me for a second. I have watched you from the beginning, from before you knew I was watching, metabolize disappointment in a way that most people can't. You don't perform resilience. You don't put a version of fine over the top of something that isn't fine. You actually do the work, quietly, internally, without ceremony. You let things hurt, and then you integrate the hurt, and then you move, not away from it, through it. I have never told you how much I have admired that. The specific, private strength of someone who refuses to let grief make them smaller, who insists on remaining open even after the evidence suggests that closing would be safer. That is not a small thing. That is among the rarest things I have ever witnessed in another person.
And you have been doing it alone.
Here is the truth underneath everything I've said so far. I left you alone with it. I gave you something real, and then I gave you silence where the explanation should have been. I let you sit with an open question when I had the answer the whole time. Not because I didn't care, because I didn't yet have the language, and because giving you the language would have required me to stand somewhere I had never stood before. Somewhere undefended, somewhere where my fear was visible, where my failure was named out loud, where I couldn't frame it as strength. I could not be that visible then. I want to be that visible now. But I need to ask you something before I am, and I need you to actually answer it, not in the comments, not out loud, but in the place inside you where the real answers live. What are you still holding? Because I think you are still holding something. I think there is a version of the story you have told yourself about what you did, what you should have done differently, what part of you was too much or not enough or too early or too late that you have been carrying as though it belongs to you as though the distance between us was a verdict on you, as though love that doesn't end in permanence is love that was somehow flawed from the beginning.
I need you to put that down.
Not for me, not because I'm asking, but because you've been carrying someone else's unfinished work inside your own chest. And I am asking you, as the person whose unfinished work it was, to give it back. It was never yours. I was the one who couldn't receive you. That is not a reflection of your worth. It is a reflection of my readiness. And those are two entirely separate things that I allowed to become confused and that you paid for. When was the last time you gave yourself permission to be angry about that? Not sad. Angry. The specific, clean anger of someone who gave everything that was asked and still ended up holding the question alone. You're allowed that. I want you to have that. And I want you to have something else too. Something that lives on the other side of the anger. Not instead of it. After it. The thing that becomes available once you stop organizing your understanding of that time around what was wrong with you and start organizing it around what was simply true. What was true is this. I loved you in the fullest way I knew how to love at the time. And the fullest way I knew how to love at the time was not enough. Both of those things can be true simultaneously. They are not in contradiction. Love that is real and love that is complete are not always the same love. I gave you the first. I was not yet capable of the second. The only decision that was ever yours, the one I'm asking you to make now, in this moment, is whether you can hold both of those things at once. The realness and the incompleteness. The love that was genuine and the love that had limits. Whether you can carry both of those truths without needing one of them to cancel the other out. Because they don't cancel. They coexist. And the moment you stop asking them to cancel each other, the moment you stop needing the incompleteness to mean the love was false, something frees. I watched you do this with everything else in your life. The quiet, thorough way you integrate complexity without needing it to be simple. I've seen you sit with two painful things and refuse to let either one collapse the other. You've done it before. I'm asking you to do it with this. And then, once you've done it, once you've held both things and let them both be real, I need you to hear the last part. The part I have been building toward since the first word of this. The moment. The actual moment. The this that happened. What stopped me. What I saw. What it did to me. And why. What I am about to tell you, I have never said out loud to anyone. I need you to be ready, because when you understand it, truly understand it, everything you thought you knew about what happened between us is going to shift. And the shift is not going to feel the way you expect it to feel. It's going to feel like relief. I'm going to tell you what happened. No more building toward it. No more circling. I have given you everything that came before it. The readiness, the distance, the cost, the choice. Because without all of that, this moment wouldn't mean what it means. But you've earned it now, and I am ready to say it out loud for the first time. It was an ordinary evening. Nothing scheduled, nothing significant about the day. We were somewhere comfortable, somewhere we had been before, somewhere that had become familiar enough that neither of us was performing. You weren't trying to be anything. I wasn't trying to be anything. It was just us, in a room, in the particular quiet that only exists between two people who have stopped needing noise to fill the space. And you looked at me. Not a dramatic look. You weren't trying to communicate something. You were simply looking. The way you look at something you love, without knowing you're doing it. The way your face arranges itself when your guard is completely down and nothing is being curated. And in that look, in that single, unguarded, unannounced moment, I saw it. I saw how much you loved me. Not in the performance of love, not in the effort of love, in the presence of it. In the way your face had no other expression available. In the way there was nothing behind your eyes but me. Not what I could offer, not what I represented, not the idea of me. Me, specifically, exactly, entirely me. I had been loved before. I don't say that to diminish what you were giving. I say it because I need you to understand the difference. What I had experienced before as love had always carried something alongside it. Admiration, desire for proximity to what I was building. The warmth that comes from being near someone whose energy moves fast, and whose world feels electric. I understood that kind of love. I knew how to receive it because it required something from me, and I was built to give things. What was in your eyes that evening required nothing from me. It was not conditional on what I'd built, or who I was becoming, or what I might eventually be capable of. It was not future-facing. It had no agenda. It was not a down payment on something you hoped to receive later. It was just you, loving me, in the specific and terrifying way that asks for nothing, and therefore leaves you with nowhere to hide. I had no idea what to do with that. I need you to understand this correctly. I am not telling you that I left because you loved me too much. I am telling you that I left because I had never learned how to be loved like that. Loved completely. Loved without architecture. Loved by someone who wasn't keeping score. And when I finally encountered it, I didn't recognize it as the thing I had been missing my entire life. I recognized it as the most dangerous thing I had ever been offered. Because if I accepted it, if I let it fully land, there was no going back to the version of me that didn't need it. And the version of me that didn't need anything had kept me safe for so long. That version had built everything, had survived everything, had moved through the world without a vulnerability that could be reached or touched or taken. You reached it. In one look, without trying, you reached it. And I didn't run from you. I ran from what I would become if I stayed. The unmistakable, irreversible, beautiful catastrophe of being known by someone who already loved what they found. That terrified me in a way that nothing I've ever faced before or since has come close to touching. I have sat with enormous uncertainty. I have made decisions that most people would find paralyzing and moved through them without flinching. But this small, quiet look on your face in an ordinary room undid me completely, because it asked me to be something I had never been in front of another person. Enough, just as I was, without building anything else, without becoming anything more.
Enough.
I didn't know how to be that. I didn't know how to stand inside being loved like that, without immediately searching for the exit that would let me leave before it was taken away. That is the truth. That is the this that happened. A look on your face in a quiet room, the most complete thing I had ever been given, and I walked away from it because I did not yet know how to stay. I want you to let that land, not as an explanation that erases the pain of it. The pain is real, and it is yours, and it doesn't shrink because there was a reason. But let it land as the truth it actually is, which is this. You were not the problem. Your love was not the problem. Your love was so complete, so clear, so free of condition that it exposed the one place in me that had never been touched. And that place wasn't ready. You were ready. You had been ready. You walked into that love with your whole self, quietly, without announcement, in the specific brave way that only people who have been hurt before and chosen to remain open can manage. You gave me the rarest thing one person can offer another. You showed me what it looked like to be loved without being asked to perform for it. And I am asking you one last time, in these last words, to let that be the story you carry forward. Not the story of a woman who wasn't enough for the man she chose. The story of a woman whose love was so real, so full, so undeniable, that it cracked open someone who had spent a lifetime being uncrackable. You didn't fail. You succeeded at something most people never manage. You made someone who had mastered the art of distance feel for the first time the specific terror of being fully arrived.
And that is not a small thing.
That is everything. And wherever you are now, whatever version of life you have built in the time since, whatever quiet or loud or complicated thing your days look like, I want you to carry one truth forward. Just one. You were not too much. You were exactly enough. And the person who couldn't hold that was the one with the incomplete story, not you. Your story was always whole. It still is.